Hello everybody, it's Dio here from Firm Affair Gaming, bringing you this Diablo 4 video. Today we are covering the beginner's guide to gearing for Diablo 4, and this will help carry you from World Tier 1 all the way to World Tier 4, and we're going to cover some tips and tricks that will help you get through the different challenges that you need to complete in order to progress from World Tier 2 to 3 and then from 3 to 4, as well as go over some general gearing strategies when you are in World Tier 3 and in World Tier 4. So without further ado, let's start with the basics and cover what you're going to need to do if you're playing in World Tier 1 or World Tier 2. First off, let's just take a look at the difference between World Tier 1 and World Tier 2. So when you're going through the campaign, it is highly recommended just to play it on World Tier 1 because the increased health the enemies get on World Tier 2 is not worth the experience gains that you're going to get. So here on Tier 1, it's for levels 1 to 50, and going through the campaign, the enemies are easy to defeat. On Tier 2, enemies are more challenging, so more hit points. They give 20% more experience and drop 15% more gold. That being said, though, the amount of time that it takes you to kill them through their extra health, if you were to be playing on World Tier 1, you would have killed more monsters and come out ahead further for the experience. And ultimately, all we want to do is just get through the campaign and get up to enough gear score and levels to be able to complete the dungeon at the end of Tier 2 to unlock Tier 3. The gear that drops, whether it's on 1 or 2, isn't going to make a difference. The level Tier 1 gear is going to be good enough to jump from 1 to 3, so there's really no real point to playing on Veteran unless you just want a longer and more challenging leveling experience, which some people do. I leveled on Veteran just because I wanted that extra challenge and to learn the game as I go and not just quickly blast through and then jump into 3. So you can do that. Now, while you are leveling, there's one thing that you should probably do is we want to go into our gameplay settings and we want to turn on our advanced tooltip. So this allows us to compare items, and then the advanced tooltip, which is going to show us the min-max properties and other modifiers on our items. So for instance, when I hover over this, it is going to show that the maximum life roll here on this ring is currently is 130, but the min was 80 and the max was 150. And then if I hit shift, because I had the hide comparison enabled, this would reveal and show the comparison between the two rings that I'm wearing versus what I am hovering over in my inventory. So as you can see, we can see all this red here, the properties lost. So obviously a lot of the stats that I have on the ring I'm wearing aren't actually on the ring, so therefore there's going to be some red there. But the green on this ring, because I don't have plus life on the ring that I'm wearing, is obviously showing green here, as it's because it will be increased over what I am missing from that ring. But the better thing here is when you're comparing rings or equipment that you want to actually change. So here I have critical strike chance equipped versus the one that's in my inventory, and we can see that on the one in the inventory it would be a minus 4.5% critical strike chance. So obviously I wouldn't want that because my damage would be going down. That being said, as we are leveling from 1 to 50 and going through the campaign, we basically are just going to be looking for the green. So on our weapons, we obviously want the highest damage per second, and the critical strike chance and vulnerable and all those key stats that we're looking for are going to be nice to have, but while we're leveling are not exactly as vital and needed, and because mainly getting the higher eye level and the extra armor and stats is going to help us more, and eventually we're going to replace and get enough of the good stats that we need to transition from tier 1 or tier 2 to tier 3. The challenge to going from tier 2 to 3 or 1 to 3, defeating that end dungeon, is more based on your levels and getting your skills in your skill tree done more so than it is based on the actual modifiers that are on your gear. And there's also a couple unique affixes that you can apply to your gear, which will also help make that transition easier as well, that we'll cover in just a little bit. When it comes to your gear, as you can see on my gear now, I'm level 80, so I'm in tier 4. I have a bunch of stuff upgraded to rank 5 because sacred and ancestral items can drop at rank 5 or be upgraded to rank 5, sorry. But while you're leveling, you're not going to want to do that because you can you'll be replacing the items so quickly, it's really not going to be worth it until maybe you're going to try to make that transition from tier 1 or 2 up to tier 3. So for those that aren't familiar, you can go to your blacksmith and you can put a piece of item in here. So I don't have a yellow, so I'll just use this legendary. As you can see, because it's a legendary, it can go up to rank 4. And so you would just upgrade it. This for jewelry, you would go over to the jeweler, and the same thing, you can upgrade it. So from the base yellow, it would be upgradable 3 times, and then sacred is 4, and then ancestral is 5. Comes time for you to complete the dungeon to unlock world tier 3. I'm just going to try to run over back to our little statue here. So we would have had to complete the Cathedral of Light, the Capstone dungeon. So that would be located, it's going to be up here. So once you complete that, then you unlock world tier 3. So you have to do that. It's a pretty straightforward dungeon. By the time you complete the campaign, you should be like high level 30s or probably most likely in your early 40s from doing the campaign and just probably a few side quests and events. That's generally where most people end up. At that point, it is fairly easy to progress through. Now, the mobs in the dungeon are going to be level 50. You should be able to get through with enough damage just based on what you have and the legendaries that you have found. But if you haven't found the legendaries that you're looking for, then you can just go around the map and do the dungeons and look for some of the aspects that you would want and go over to the occultist and imprint them. So I'm just going to run over here. So there's basically like you want a few DPS ones that are going to help you kill things, and then there's going to be a couple vital survivability ones that will help make your life a little bit easier. So if you go try the dungeon, you're struggling a little bit, like we could put this in here, and then you go to the codex, and the codex that helps for me when I was going through this is adding the aspect of the protector. So this is damaging an elite, grants you a barrier absorbing up to X amount of damage. Obviously this is 4,000. This is based on my level 80. It wouldn't be that high for somebody that was in the low 40s. Most likely that is maybe 1,000 or 700. But basically it's a nice survivability that protects you and gives you enough time for maybe one of your own abilities that are going to add some survivability. So you want to add that and be wearing that as one of your aspects. Most likely you're going to also have the bubble that is going to appear around you from the neck that you get as a quest reward. So when you get hit and you're not healthy, a magical bubble is summoned around you, and you are completely immune while you're in that. The neck, I believe, is a 7.5-second bubble, so that adds some immunity for you as well. And between the combination of these two, it was what I felt that all I needed to get through, and adding in some aspects for damage. As you go through, you just do the dungeons, and then you can bring your items over here. And even if you have a legendary that already has an aspect on it, you can imprint over top. So obviously I'm not going to do that because that's my actual weapon. But see, I could overwrite that and just click imprint, and it would overwrite, and then I'd have an aspect that I need. So even if you can't find it through luck and RNG, if you go do the dungeon, you can create your own. And with a few DPS legendaries, those couple survivability legendaries imprinted, even though the aspects are the minimum roll, as opposed to when you could find them naturally. So like for instance, my Hammer of the Ancients here, by finding it through RNG out in the world, I can get up to 100%. But if I was to use the aspect, it would be 50%. But this is because it's a two-hander. If it was on a one-hander, it would be like 34% or something like that. So obviously it would be a min roll, but having it as a min roll is better than not having it at all. So with that being said, like I was just saying, with a few aspects, if you can't find your legendaries, print them onto your rares, turn them into legendaries, and add in those 2 survivability items, and then you'll be able to jump into that capstone dungeon and get through it for sure. So now that we are into tier 3 and we've defeated the tier 2 capstone dungeon, the gearing up process has changed a little bit. So while we are wearing those 2 survivability items that I had mentioned, we're going to be transitioning out of those and starting to pay closer attention to the world drops that we're getting, because now we're going to be farming specific gear. So, but first I want to cover what really changes as we go from tier 2 to tier 3. We move from this just being able to get a rare ring up to be able to get a sacred ring. So, and then when we get to tier 4, we get to get an ancestral ring. So just to show a little bit of how this changes outside of the item level, as well as it has a bit of an impact because we're going to be higher level. So on a rare ring here, the item level is 540. It's for level 42. We can see here the critical strike chance has a base minimum of 1.4% to 3%. And then when we move up to a sacred ring, the base minimum stat on critical strike, now it's at the top here, is now 1.6% to 4%. So now the item level went up about 120, and so as a result as well, the critical strike chance is migrating up as the item level goes up, as well as because it's a sacred ring. And then when we get to an ancestral ring, now we jumped up to 769 item power. The critical strike chance is now 1.8% to 5%. So as we go up from rare to ancestral, or to sacred and ancestral, the min-max stats of the actual affixes on the items increases. So when we were leveling from 1 to 50, we're going to have a bunch of rare items. And then when we got onto tier world 3, we got the sacred. We're going to want to improve all our gear from rare to sacred items, because we're going to get all those small upgrades like the 0.2%. Like all that matters when you figure in that we have, I don't know, 3, 6, 11, 12 pieces of gear, sometimes more, I guess, if you're a barbarian. Like all that little changes or little increases when it's combined with everything is going to add pretty big dividends. Not to mention on some pieces, like for instance on gloves, here on my ancestral, like I have +3 ranks to Hammer of the Ancients. I could have had max 4, but if it was just a rare item, it would be 2, sacred is 3, and then ancestral can have up to 4. So all those things impact your ability and the damage and survivability and all that stuff as well. So now that you are on World Tier 3 and we are now replacing all our rare items with our sacred, you're going to be wanting to get the max roll best as possible. So we're going to be looking for these drops to drop out in the world, and then we're going to go, and if it happens not to be on the right slot, or we found a yellow that is better than the actual item that we're using, then we can go to the occultist and extract the aspect off it and then imprint it back on, and then we wear it. So if you can see here, this is imprinted hammer. So obviously I found this mace, it was better than what I was using, so I took the aspect off a different item and then imprinted it on top, and now I'm using this. The one thing to remember is that I can't then re-extract this imprint. It's a one-time use, so I made sure to save this 100% roll for when I found an amazing item. And so now if I ever find a replacement, either I'm going to have to use one that is slightly less, like this is 48, but it's 200, so it'd become 96, or I'd have to find another world drop that was going to give me a 50/100% roll for that particular aspect. And then, because if we, once we get these sacred items and we have the right imprint in them, on them, or the, sorry, I should just say the right aspect on them, whether it was through imprinting it or finding it just naturally out in the world, then we're going to want to upgrade it to rank 5. So because it's a sacred item, it can be upgraded to rank 5, so you'll go and upgrade that. And also we're going to want to do a lot more reforging through the occultist as well. So by that I mean we're just going to enchant the item to re-roll one of the properties that we're looking for. So for instance, on these pair of boots, I have, if I get the right enchant, so I've been trying to get a certain stat on it. I have dodge chance on this. Ultimately, I'm not really happy with it. So then you would just re-roll it, but I don't really want to mess around with my thing right now, so I'll just use this one for example. So on this one, I know that I like the damage to slowed based on my build, crit chance, resource. So this is the one that I would re-roll, and then you're going to start doing that. It can get expensive. None of those are any good. So as you can see, it went from like 50,000 to now 300,000. I might roll again. I guess I'll just go with lucky chance. That's not very good. and then the next one 350. So it can be fairly expensive, but ultimately you're going to want to change one of the affixes that may not be ideal for you and try to get a good one. Try not to run out of money. It can be quite costly, and also we want to upgrade to rank 5. So as you can see, if I just hover over my gear, pretty much every slot has at least one affix that I've re-rolled on all my items to try to get a better stat that is more better suited to my build. And then I've upgraded everything to rank 5. Now, the next thing that we're going to have to look for is survivability changes a little bit when you go from tier 3 and trying to get onto tier 4. We are no longer using, or most builds don't use, the immune bubble that happens if you get hit, as well as the absorb shield when you're fighting an elite. Most builds now move to this, what do I want to call it, the aspect of might, where if you attack with a basic skill, it grants you 20% damage reduction for up to 6 seconds. As well as they also like to use this one here, the aspect of disobedience. You gain up to 0.5% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to a 50% damage mitigation. So those are two items that you're going to have to either use the aspects and imprint onto it through the codex, or find them out in the world and then either have them in the right slot or imprint them as well. It just seems like most builds, they don't want to use the absorb shield because it doesn't provide as much value as what armor is going to provide from most of the melee hits. Most magical affixes and spells and all that are dodgeable, so you shouldn't really be getting hit by those. But when you're getting surrounded, you're eventually going to get hit by melee hit. So the increased armor and damage reductions is going to provide more survivability. One other thing that I want to throw out there is the gems could change. While you're leveling up, the best gem to have in your armor is the life gem, so the red gem. And then in tier 3, the red gems are still pretty good, but when you get up to tier 4, as you can see, I'm now wearing the blue ones, which give me damage reduction while fortified. So you may just want to visit to see what gems might change for your builds as well as you progress through the different tiers. When it comes to doing the Capstone dungeon for tier 3 to progress to tier 4, you're going to want to, let me just double check. So it is the Fallen Temple. The mobs in there will be level 70. It ranges for what levels you may need to be in order to progress. If you want to do yourself the best favor, would be to make sure you have all your renown done, so you can have all your skill points as well as all your paragon points. If I get back into my Paragon board here, so you can see, so all this stuff, because it'll make your life a bit easier having all those extra points. And it ranges on what level you're going to be able to do this. When I first tried it on my very first character, I believe I was like level 62 or 63 when I made the progression from World Tier 3 to 4. And then on my second attempt, I was 59 on my Sorcerer. But that was rough, and I don't play hardcore, and I died a bunch because I didn't have survivability items, and then I had to go change my gear and get a couple more survivability items. But just that's to say that there's a bit of a range. You could be level 60, or you could wait and farm more gear and do it when you're like level 67 and 68. It's up to you. Like I said, the mobs in there are going to be level 70. In order to pull it off, you're going to want to have your gear at 5 of 5 on all pieces, and you're going to want to use the jeweler to make sure that there are sockets in all the appropriate pieces. So pants and chest have 2, helms 1, jewelry all 1, one-handed weapons 1, and two-handed weapons get 2. So you're going to want to make sure you have all those. Make sure you go to Cultist and do the enchant to re-roll a useless stat into hopefully a useful one. And all those things with the new survivability items and all the appropriate DPS items that you would have found and aspects that you'll have imprinted on should give you a high chance of success. And if you go in there and you find that you're dying to the trash, you probably need to go back out and get better gear. But if you can make it to the boss and you're finding that you're dying to some of the mechanics, it does take a little bit to learn it, but it is sequenced, so you can kind of figure out, maybe I just need to use my buttons in a little bit different order. Or if you do need a little bit more survivability, what you can do with these two, the aspect of disobedience and might, aren't cutting it, you can go back and do the aspect that provides of the protector or even the immune bubble. Like if you, because eventually it's just a survival, you're going to do enough damage to take him out. There's no enraged timer, there's no one shot mechanic. So if you need to survive and drop a little bit of survivability, then don't be afraid to do so. I had to do that when I was trying it at level 59. And now that you've hit World Tier 4, the principles that you used in World Tier 3 are going to be the same. Ultimately, you're probably going to drop, if you had to pick up the Protector and the Immune Bubble, you're probably going to need to drop those and just figure out how to survive utilizing the aspect of Disobedience and of Might and your cooldowns. If you're having trouble with a certain build, you might need to go online and just do a bit of research to your certain builds and see what you're missing. In the beginning stages of World Tier 4, when you're like level 70, I'll go to about 80, 85. You're going to gear much the same, just looking for the best stats as well as maybe putting on some survivability onto your legs, and your chest and helm are usually the survivability slots. So here I have armor, damage reduction, fortified damage reduction, and same with my helm. I got armor and some extra healing. Ultimately, I'd like something a little bit different there, but I haven't got a better roll and didn't want to go broke rolling it. But after you get up to level 85 plus, you're going to start to want to prioritize getting some plus life on certain items, because the higher the nightmares that you're going to do, life is going to become a pretty big factor. And so getting those on certain pieces are going to be key as well. I didn't want to cover much more of that as myself. I'm just getting into that part and learning it as I go. So I just wanted to keep this short and to the beginning stages, and hopefully I've been able to do that for you. So this kind of concludes the video. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know below. I'll do my best to answer them, be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. As always, we appreciate any like, shares, and subscribes. And of course, one of our viewers and friends of the channel just joined. CPAR just joined my group, so I'll have to see what he's up to. And that is, anyways, I hope you guys are enjoying Diablo 4, and we're going to be bringing more videos to you. And sorry for the delay in between videos. I know they've probably been about a month or so. That's my fault, and I apologize. Just life got busy, but more videos are coming. So hope you're having fun with Diablo 4, and see you in our next video.